Roberto Baggio has heard the thunder of packed football stadiums, felt the pressure of World Cup nights, and lived through moments that shaped Italian sports history forever. But even the legendary Divine Ponytail was left speechless when he stepped inside the Foro Italico in Rome. He arrived expecting an afternoon of tennis, yet what he witnessed felt far bigger than a normal match. Philippine flags covered the stands, chants of Laban Alex echoed across the Pietrangeli court, and thousands of fans turned the Italian capital into a second home for 20-year-old Alex Eala. The atmosphere was electric from the very first point. The noise never disappeared during breaks, never faded between rallies, and only grew louder when Eala fought back from a shocking 3-0 deficit against a higher-ranked opponent. Baggio, a man who has experienced the pressure of World Cup semifinals and Champions League nights, leaned forward in disbelief as the young Filipino battled with fearless intensity. Sources close to the moment say the football icon could not stop watching. For someone who once carried the hopes of an entire nation on his shoulders, this energy felt different. Rome on May 8, 2026 became more than just another stop on the tennis calendar. Inside the packed Pietrangeli court, overflowing with fans and emotion, Roberto Baggio witnessed a sporting phenomenon he never expected to see again. The Philippine flags were impossible to ignore. They filled every corner of the Pietrangeli court, hanging from shoulders, painted across smiling faces, and waving proudly in the Roman air as fans traveled from all over Europe to support Alex Eala on one of tennis' biggest stages. The chants of Laban Alex thundered through the Foro Italico, bouncing off the marble statues surrounding the arena and transforming the atmosphere into something that felt more like a World Cup final than a tennis match. Roberto Baggio stopped in his tracks as he entered the stands, stunned by the noise and passion surrounding the young Filipino star. The Italian football legend, his iconic ponytail now streaked with gray, scanned the crowd in disbelief before quietly asking a tournament official, "What is this?" The official simply smiled, knowing he had seen this reaction before from other famous Italian icons who had witnessed the growing phenomenon surrounding Eala. "This is Alex Eala," he reportedly told Baggio. "She is from the Philippines, and wherever she plays, her people follow." At that moment, however, the match itself was slipping away fast. Wang Xinyu had exploded to a dominant 3-0 lead, breaking Eala's serve twice while completely controlling the baseline exchanges with aggressive precision. The packed Foro Italico suddenly grew tense as fans feared the dream start could turn into disaster. But what happened next became the moment that truly captured Roberto Baggio's attention. A man who built his own legendary career on dramatic comebacks and unforgettable pressure moments watched closely as Eala refused to surrender, preparing to launch a fight back that would leave the entire stadium inspired. Roberto Baggio knew all about impossible comebacks. No moment defined that better than Italy's unforgettable run to the 1994 FIFA World Cup final, when the legendary playmaker carried the Azzurri through pressure-filled battles against Nigeria, Spain, and Bulgaria with performances that became part of football history. But as he watched from the stands in Rome, seeing 20-year-old Alex Eala fight her way back into the match-awakened emotions he had not experienced in years. Wang Xinyu had started like a player determined to make a statement. The Chinese star, seated 31st and coming off a first-round bye, looked completely in control during the opening games. Her ground strokes were sharp, her footwork flawless, and her confidence visible in every rally she dictated from the baseline. Across the net, Eala initially looked drained after spending more than 2 grueling hours on court against Magdalena Freck just days earlier. Baggio immediately recognized the signs because few athletes understand exhaustion better than him. The former Juventus and AC Milan icon spent his entire career reading body language under pressure, understanding when a player was mentally broken and when they were simply running on empty. What caught his attention was that Eala never showed defeat in her eyes. She looked tired, yes, but she never looked beaten. Even as Wang dominated the early exchanges and the scoreline threatened to spiral out of control, the young Filipina continued fighting for every point with stubborn determination. From his seat inside the electric Foro Italico atmosphere, Baggio could sense the shift beginning long before the scoreboard reflected it. The match appeared to be slipping away from Alex Eala in the opening minutes. Early reports later described how Wang Xinyu stormed to a commanding 3-0 lead after breaking Eala's serve twice in the first and third games, placing the young Filipina under immediate pressure in front of a packed Roman crowd. Roberto Baggio leaned forward in his seat as tension spread through the Pietrangeli court. Around him, Philippine flags still waved proudly, but the deafening chants of Laban Alex had softened into nervous murmurs filled with hope and anxiety. Then everything changed. Starting in the fourth game, Eala suddenly raised the intensity of her attacking play. The ground strokes that had previously landed short and cautious now began painting the corners with confidence and aggression. Rallies that Wang had controlled with ease transformed into exhausting baseline battles, and one by one, Eala started winning them. The momentum shift was impossible to ignore. She reeled off 4 straight games, breaking Wang's serve in both the 4th and 6th games as the energy inside Foro Italico exploded back to life. Baggio's eyes reportedly widened as he watched the comeback unfold. He had seen this kind of determination before during his own legendary career. The athlete everyone doubts refusing to surrender to the script already written for them. The crowd sensed it too. The chants grew louder with every point. The Philippine flags waved even harder. And by the time Eala secured another crucial break in the 10th game, to seal the opening set, Baggio was standing and applauding with the rest of the stadium. Witnesses near the football icon claimed they heard him quietly say, "This is not just talent. This is something else." Even after the match ended, the atmosphere inside Pietrangeli remained electric. The chants continued echoing across the clay, while fans celebrated what they had just witnessed. Yet Roberto Baggio stayed, seated long after many spectators had started leaving. The former World Player of the Year looked completely absorbed in the moment, still processing the performance he had just seen. Few athletes understand greatness the way Baggio does. He spent an entire lifetime studying pressure, resilience, and the mentality required to become a champion. And as he watched Alex Eala walk off the court surrounded by roaring supporters and waving Philippine flags, he seemed to recognize something rare. Not just a talented tennis player, but a competitor with the heart of a true warrior. Roberto Baggio has shared the field with some of football's greatest legends. From Paolo Maldini to Gabriel Batistuta, from Marco van Basten to Romario, he spent his career competing among icons who defined an era of world football. So when journalists approached him after Alex Eala's dramatic comeback victory in Rome, many expected him to break down her tennis skills, her forehand, her movement on clay, or the tactical adjustments she made against a higher-ranked opponent. But Baggio focused on something far deeper than technique. "I have been in stadiums all over the world," he said with the calm intensity that once made him one of football's most feared competitors. "I have heard the San Siro during a Milan derby in the final minutes. I have heard the Stadio Olimpico erupt after dramatic goals. But I have never experienced anything like this." He then pointed toward the stands where Philippine flags still waved proudly long after the match had ended. "These people are not just fans," he continued. "They are family. And she feels that. You can see it in the way she fights. She is not playing for rankings or money. She is playing for them." Baggio admitted he was captivated by the way Eala handled adversity. He watched her fall behind 3-0 in the opening set, saw Wang Xinyu break her serve twice, and sensed the momentum shifting dangerously against the young Filipina. Yet instead of collapsing, Eala responded with fearless determination, and that was the moment that truly resonated with the Italian legend. For those who remember Baggio's own career, the similarities are impossible to ignore. He was never the strongest player physically, nor the fastest athlete on the pitch, but he possessed something that could never be taught: an instinct for pressure moments, and a refusal to surrender when everything seemed lost. During Italy's unforgettable run to the 1994 FIFA World Cup final, the Azzurri struggled badly in the group stage and were heavily criticized by the media. Then Baggio took control of the tournament. He scored a dramatic late winner against Nigeria, produced brilliance against Spain in the quarterfinals, and delivered another unforgettable performance against Bulgaria in the semifinals, carrying Italy on his shoulders when the nation needed him most. Watching Alex Eala battle through adversity in Rome reminded him of that same fighting spirit, the rare mentality shared only by athletes who refuse to accept defeat, no matter how impossible the situation appears. That he carried Italy to the 1994 World Cup final in a way few players ever have, a tournament run that still sits among the most iconic individual performances in football history. And as Roberto Baggio watched Alex Eala battle back from 3-0 down against Wang Xinyu, he saw the same refusal to accept a pre-written outcome that once defined his own career. When Eala fell behind early, many players would have mentally stepped away from the match. They would have accepted that it simply wasn't their day, conserving energy for the next tournament, the next opportunity, the next chance. But Baggio noticed something different. He paused, eyes still fixed on the court, where Eala had just finished signing autographs for a seemingly endless line of fans. She did not fold, he reflected. She did not accept defeat. She fought point by point, game by game, until everything changed. That is not something you can teach. That is something you are born with. Roberto Baggio has played in front of 90,000 fans at the San Siro. He has felt the crushing weight of a nation during a World Cup penalty kick. He has lived through the highest peaks and lowest valleys football can offer. Yet he admitted that what he witnessed at the Foro Italico stayed with him in a different way. When asked whether he had ever experienced a crowd like this before, the divine ponytail treated the question with quiet seriousness. In football, he explained, the crowd reacts to moments: a goal, a save, a tackle. The emotion rises and falls in waves. Here, it was different. His gaze drifted back to the stands, where Philippine flags were still waving long after the players had left the court. Here, he said, the energy doesn't spike or fall. It stays. It is constant. It just exists. From the first point to the last, the crowd wasn't simply reacting to what was happening on court. They were actively shaping it. Every chant, every flag wave, every collective breath seemed to push Alex Eala forward, as if the stadium itself refused to let her lose. Baggio took a moment before speaking again, carefully choosing his words. I have never seen anything like this, he admitted. Not in over 30 years of professional football, but the divine ponytail wasn't finished yet. He had one final message, not for the journalists, but for the 20-year-old from Manila who had just conquered Rome. Asked whether he had any advice for Eala, something from his own career that could guide her forward, Baggio fell silent for a few seconds. When he finally spoke, his tone softened. Tell her to never lose this, he said. The connection with the fans, the joy she plays with, the fight in her heart. These are things that cannot be replaced. Trophies come and go. Rankings rise and fall. But the love of the people, that stays forever. He paused, then added one more thought. I carried Italy on my shoulders once. It was heavy, heavier than any trophy, but I would not trade it for anything. She carries the Philippines on her shoulders too, and she is only 20 years old, and she is doing it with a smile. That he stood to leave, then paused and turned back one last time. She is special, Roberto Baggio said quietly, not because she wins, but because of how she makes people feel when she plays. That is rare. That is something that cannot be coached. The divine ponytail has scored 205 Serie A goals, lifted 2 Scudetti, and been named FIFA World Player of the Year. Yet as he walked away from the Foro Italico, he admitted that Alex Eala had reminded him of something he hadn't felt in years. Baggio has seen the best of the best. He has shared the pitch with legends. endured the highest highs of victory and the deepest lows of defeat. And yet, on a warm Roman afternoon at a tennis tournament far removed from football, he witnessed something that stayed with him. The Philippine flags were everywhere. The chants of Laban Alex echoed off the marble statues, refusing to fade. And a 20-year-old from Manila, 11,000 kilometers from home, had turned the Foro Italico into something that felt like belonging. "She made me feel something I haven't felt in a long time," Baggio admitted. "Not nostalgia. Hope. The kind of hope that comes from watching someone who refuses to give up, no matter the score, no matter the odds," he said softly. He paused again, then added the words that would soon spread far beyond the Foro Italico. "I carried Italy on my shoulders once. She carries the Philippines. That is not a burden. That is an honor. And she wears it well." The question that lingers is simple, yet impossible to fully answer. When Roberto Baggio looks back on his visit to the Foro Italico, will he remember the tennis match itself, or the moment a 20-year-old from Manila reminded him why he fell in love with sport in the first place? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Court Legacy for more stories that go beyond the scoreline. Roberto Baggio, the legendary Italian footballer known as Il Divin Codino, the Divine Ponytail, appeared at the Italian Open in Rome and praised Alex Eala after her stunning 6-4, 6-3 victory over 31st seed Wang Xinyu, the 1993 FIFA World Player of the Year, who famously led Italy to the 1994 FIFA World Cup final with his iconic performances, watched from the stands as the Filipino sensation battled back from a 3-0 deficit in the opening set to secure a straight sets victory. When she was down 3-0, many players would have folded. He reflected. They would have accepted the situation. But she didn't. She fought point by point. That is not something you can teach. That is something you are born with. Baggio also praised the Filipino fans who filled the Pietrangeli court, describing their unwavering support as unlike anything he had experienced in his 30-year football career. "She carries the Philippines on her shoulders," he said. "She is 20 years old, and she is doing it with a smile."